Hello and welcome to the 9th video in the PHP e-commerce series. We're going to continue building the admin area of the Shanta's Boutique site. And so this is where we left off. We're just basically displaying the amount of, we're displaying our brands from our database that we have access to in our website. And that's stored in this brand table here. And what we're going to do in this video is we're going to give the ability to add new brands. We're going to delete brands and we're going to edit brands. So this video may get a little long because we're going to deal with a little bit of inserting and updating and deleting fields into the database. We're going to deal with a little bit of security, and we're going to create some new functions as well. So let's dive right in and get busy. So one thing that I want to do here is let's just go ahead and close all of this. We'll just leave open our brands, and we will also open our core init.php file, and let's create a new file. In this file we're going to create in the main directory of our project, and we're just going to call that config.php. okay, I'll show you why we're doing that in a minute. Okay, so in this config.php, this will be really quick. Let's open up PHP tags here, and let's just define a constant. So we do that with PHP's function, the define function, and it takes two parameters. The first is going to be the constant, and we're going to call this base URL, and it needs to be all caps. Okay. Alright, and the next parameter, what we're going to do is we're going to use an array that PHP or that Apache or whatever creates for us, and it's the server, and inside of that I have HTTP host. Okay, and what that's going to do is give us the directory root of the host. Okay, actually what we want to do there, I'm sorry, let's do document root, and that's going to give us the path to the root of this document, which is why we put it in the main tutorial here. So the next thing I want to do though is append on. I want to append on, with the period there, a string, and let's do / and then the name of your application. Mine happens to be tutorial. That's the root of my application, and one more / there. Okay, so then I just want to, in the next line, we'll echo out base URL, so we can take a look at that. Okay, so in your browser, let's just go ahead and navigate directly to that. So it's tutorial / config.php, and right here it gives the path. This is the base path, okay, of our server. Okay, so now we can use that in PHP, so we have it's just a lot easier to include files if we have this. So we want to just take a minute to set that up. Let's go back to our admin area here. Okay, so let's get rid of that echo statement, and that's actually all we're going to do in our config file. But what I want to do is in the init.php file here, we'll get rid of, right here we're also defining that base URL. I just did that in an earlier video. Let's just get rid of that, and instead now we're going to include something. And what we're going to include, which I haven't created yet, we'll do that in a moment, is a helpers file, so that we can create functions and use those functions that we're going to use often throughout our application. So what I want to do is I'm just going to require once, and what I want to require here is we're going to do base URL, and we're going to append on to that helpers / helpers.php. Alright, and we'll just hit save. So let's create that. So in the root directory here, let's create a new folder and let's just call that helpers. Okay, so now we have that here, and let's create inside that a file, and we're just going to call that helpers.php. Alright, so once we create that file, let's just test that real quick. So let's just echo helpers right here. Actually, we need to open our PHP tags for that to work. So echo helpers. Alright. And we will save that out. And let's just refresh the page. Oh, notice use of undefined constant base URL. So let's take a look at that. What did I do wrong? Alright, so use of undefined, it's because we actually you probably saw this, I forgot to include that config file in our core init. So what we need to do is just require once, and we need to back up here, and we're going to say config.php. Oops. Alright, we'll save that out, refresh the page. Alright, now we can see right here it printed helpers. So now we know that this helpers file is included. So for now we'll just delete that echo, and we're going to come back to that and add some functionality later. So I just wanted to go ahead and get that required in. So now anywhere in our application that this init.php, we'll have access to both our config file if we add something to that later, and we'll have access to this helpers file that we created right here. We're going to put some functions here. So here's our config file. So we're just defining this constant right there. Okay, so let's get busy here. We're on the brands.php, so let's have a look at that really quick. So we're back here, and what I want to do is add a form above this table that will we'll add a form to add new fields here. So let's go ahead and take care of that. So right here above this table, and you know what? Let's just add a horizontal rule here. So HR tag. So after this brands, there'll be a line there, a break, and let's go ahead and put us a comment here. Whoops. Put us a comment, and we'll say brand form, just so we know what's going on here in our code. And I want to add a div. We'll close that div. Alright, let's go down a couple lines here, and I want to add a form. Alright. Now in the form we're going to give this a class. This is a Bootstrap class, which by the way you can just go to the Bootstrap website to find this stuff out. And I'll just show you that really quick because I haven't done that much. If you just Google Bootstrap, I think it's getbootstrap.com. You can go here and you go to CSS, and you can see here you got buttons and forms and all that. So you can see the actual examples and the classes that you add to make this. So we're going to add an inline form, which is right here. So the form will be form inline. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that really quick. Oops. So this is form dash inline. Okay, and what we want to do is inside of our really quickly, let's go ahead and set up our form so that it'll work. For action, what we want to do is we want to just submit this right back to the same page. So brands.php with the action, and we're going to, for the method, we are going to use post. Okay. So then inside of our form, we're going to create a div, and we're going to give it a class of form group. Alright, that's just, and if I spell that correctly, dang, I can't type tonight. That is directly from the Bootstrap website. Alright, so then what we're going to do is inside here we're going to create our label, and we'll do for, and we'll just call this brand here because we're going to give the input ID of brand. We'll close that label tag. All right. Let's go ahead and add our text there. So we'll put add a brand. All right. And then we're going to have an input here. All right. So this input will need a type of text. It will need a name of brand. We need an ID of brand as well. And the reason that I have to give it both is because this for right here is for the ID, so that's where it plays in. And the name is what we're going to use as when we submit this as post data. The post will have an associative array, and that key will be called the names of our inputs. So that's why we have to give it a name. All right, and we're going to also give this a class equal to let's see, I think that was form control. Let's just double check that real quick. Yeah, form control. Okay. And the last thing we want to do is give it a value. We can actually give it a value of let's close that input. What we could do is echo with PHP the post. So it's $_post, and then it's an associative array, and then we just pass it the name of that, so it's brand. So what that's going to do, and let's go ahead and close our PHP here. What this is going to do is if someone posts something but they get an error, it will keep that text in the box because of this value. So it's super annoying if you submit a form and you have errors, but it just deletes everything you already typed. This wouldn't be too big of a deal because it's only one field, but I think it's just a good habit to go ahead and put a value there so that their input stays. That way they can also see if there's an error, what they need to change more easily. Alright, so the next thing we need to do is add our submit button. So we'll do an input, and this time the type is going to be submit. And we'll also give this a name, and we'll just call this add underscore submit. And we'll give it a value. And the value of this is what you want it to say on the button. So we're going to put add brand. Alright. And we'll give this a class of button large, and then button, we'll make it green. So this is, again, this is all Bootstrap here. We don't have to do any of that, so it's pretty nice of them. So let's go ahead and look at our buttons really quick. So here's our button with a class of success. We'll make it this green button there, and then large is actually button-lg, not button dash spelled out. So let's change that really quick. Alright, so here's our form. So let's go ahead and now go to our page and refresh and take a look at that. Alright, so we see we have an undefined deal here. That's because we don't have any post data. So we'll take care of that, and then we will also take care of we want to have this centered. And I changed my mind about this button large. Let's get rid of that because that looks dumb. So let's go back here and just get rid of that class. We'll leave the button and the button success. But actually what's going on here is there's no post data yet because we haven't hit submit. So what we need to do is we need to put a ternary operator in here. And the way that we do that is, well, the way that I like to do it is put two sets of parentheses here, and we're going to, inside this middle here, we're going to say if, so this is basically saying if, okay, it's just a shorthand basically. Well, it is a shorthand, so we're saying we're going to give it a condition. So we're going to say if is set, okay, and then inside of that is set, we're going to cut this out, and we're going to put that inside of the is set. Okay, so then what's going to happen is it's saying if it's set, then what are we going to do? Okay, so right here what I want to do is I want to put a question mark, and if it's set, okay, I want to echo that value. So we'll put post brand, and then if it's not set, which you put a colon for that, we're just going to put 2 single quotes with nothing in between it. So that'll make it blank. So let's go ahead and take a look at this now. I'll hit refresh, and now we see that that notice is gone out of there because nothing's set in there. But if I would put hey in there and submit it, it stayed. So that's working now. So I know that I went through that a little quickly, but you could pause the video, rewind it, and take a look at this ternary operator here. And I am using the PHP the shortcut for echo. So you would normally have to do PHP and echo there if you want. But basically you do your condition, question mark, what needs to happen if the condition evaluates to true, colon, and then what do you want to do if the condition evaluates to false. Alright, so it's just shorthand for an if-else statement basically within an echo. Alright, very useful. Alright, so let's go ahead and get this thing in the center of the page. So to do that, inside this div that we wrap the form in, we're just going to give that a class equals text dash center, which is a Bootstrap class. They've already added that, so then I can go ahead and hit refresh here. Let's just, there we go. So then the next thing that I want to do, I think, is after the form, let's go ahead and do another horizontal rule right here. Just kind of separate the form from the actual brands table. Alright, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to start to manage the input that the users put in. Okay, so let's go back to our brands page here, and at the top in the PHP tags, we're going to start managing that. So I like to, let's go ahead and put some comments, and we're going to say if add form is submitted, we'll do whatever's below this. Okay, so what we need to do that, we'll put an if statement. So let's go ahead and get our if statement, the skeleton of our if statement in place. And for the condition, what we're going to say is if is set $_post, and then since we gave that submit button a name of add.submit, we'll use that, and we'll know if they click that submit button, this will evaluate to true. It will be set. So then whatever inside this if statement happens. So after they hit submit, whatever we put in here is going to happen. So what are we going to put in here? We're going to do a couple things. One, we're going to do a couple checks on the form to make sure they're not giving us blank information and just hitting submit. We're also going to make sure that the brand doesn't already exist in the database. And if either of those are true, we're going to print an error back to the page. And if there's no errors and it will go ahead and submit it and update the database. So let's start that out. So let's check first of all. Well, before I go on, let's go ahead and create up here above all this if statement. Let's create our errors array. So we're just going to put errors equals an array, and we'll make it an empty array. Okay. Then inside this if statement, I'm going to put some comments, and we'll check if brand is blank. Okay. So what we're going to do is we'll do another if statement, and we'll say if $_post, man, can't type tonight, $_post of brand, okay, and we'll say if it equals blank. So that's just two single quotes with nothing in between them. So if it's blank, what do we want to do? Well, what we want to do then is add to the errors array. So to do that, we'll just say errors. Okay, we'll say errors, and we'll concatenate on, concatenate on our error message, and we'll say you must enter a brand. Alright, and we'll save that. Alright, so since we have this error check here, let's go ahead and before we create another error check, let's go ahead and create a function that will print our errors to the screen. So in order to do that, let's go to our helpers file, and we're going to create a function, and we'll call this display underscore errors, and we can use this anywhere in our application, and we're going to pass it in our errors array, and open and close our curly braces. Alright, so what do we want to do here? I'm just going to create a variable called display. Okay, and I'm going to set that equal to, we're going to give this an opening unordered list tag with a class equal to BG danger, I believe. Okay, and that is a Bootstrap class that will make it kind of a pale red color. And so what we're doing is just creating an unordered list right here, a UL tag. Alright, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to take the errors array, and for each error we're going to add a list item inside of that. So we'll just say for each, and then errors as error. Okay, for each errors in the error array here, what we want to do is we're going to take our display, and we're going to, and this is important to put the period equals, so that's, we're going to concatenate onto the string. And what are we going to concatenate on the string? Well, we're going to do a list item, and we want to give this a class equal to danger, I believe, and we'll close that list item. Okay, and then inside of here we're going to break out of our echo here, or break out of our string, and I'm going to put two periods, and in between those two periods I'm going to put error. Okay, so what's going to happen here is it's going to print this part, okay, which is our list opening tag, and then it's going to concatenate on our error, and then it's going to concatenate on our closing list, our closing li tag. Okay, so that's it. But after this for each, we want to close our UL, so we're going to do display, and we're going to concatenate on to that display then our closing UL tag. Alright, and then the last thing that we need to do is we need, since this is a function, we need to return display. So it's only, you know what, 8 lines of code here, and now we have a function that we could pass in an array of errors, and it will print that in an unordered list that's styled with Bootstrap styling for errors. Let's just make sure I'm correct on those real quick. So let's go to helper classes. So it's text danger for the red, and then it was BG danger for this red background. So I need to change that class up a little bit. So right here in this li, it's just class of text dash danger. Alright, so now we just need to inside of our, we're back in our brands page, and what we want to do is if there are errors, so we're still inside of the submit here, this is our closing submit curly brace, and after this creating a brand, checking for this to be empty, we want let's do one more here. Let's say check if brand exists in database. Alright, so we'll do that check, and then we'll do display. I like to kind of line everything out with comments, so then we'll say display errors. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, since we have this errors array, and if this error happens, it's going to put this into the array. Okay, so what we can do is run a check, and we can say if not empty, okay, errors, then we want to do something. So if that errors array is not empty, what do we want to do? Well, we just created our display errors deal right here in our helper. So what we're going to do is, if the errors are not empty, we want to echo display underscore errors, and that was a function, and then we want to pass that in our errors array, and that's it. So then what we can do is add an else statement here, and we can put a comment for now. So when we get down to this point, if we've done all of our checks, and first of all, if it is empty, it's going to print if the errors have errors in the array, it's going to print those to the screen. If not, in this else statement, we'll say add brand to database. Alright, so we'll just put a comment there so we know what that code is going to do. Alright, so I know this is a little convoluted, but it's really just a bunch of nested if statements. Alright, so let's take a look at that and see what we got. So I'm going to go back here now, and I'll reload the page, and I'm just going to hit add brand. Alright, so you see what happens here is, now in this red background here, I get a list item that says you must enter a brand, and that was because this was empty. Alright, and so if let me go back to the code here. So since that was empty, which was done with this check right here, it added you must enter a brand to this errors array. And so when the code got down to here, saw that errors array is not empty, so it ran our display errors function and echoed that to the screen, and this is where that function happens in our helpers array. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is we'll do one more check. Let's check and see if it's in the database. Alright, so right underneath this we're going to go ahead and set up a variable. We'll call it SQL. You can call it whatever you want. And I use double quotes from SQL again. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say select all from the table brand, and that was in our database right here, this brand table. We're going to select all of them. Select all from brand, and we're going to give it a condition of where, and then we want to check where brand is equal to, and you know, what we need to do is create a variable as well. So right here at the top of this, what I want to do is say brand is equal to $_post of brand. That way we have a variable called brand, and it's coming from that post array from our table, or from our form, I'm sorry. So now inside this SQL statement, I can add single quotes now, and I can just put brand in here. So what it's going to do is select all from brand where the brand column is equal to our variable brand here. So essentially what's going to happen is it's going to check, and it's going to we're going to check if this already exists in the database. So let's go ahead now, and we have our database object, and let's query it, and we'll pass that SQL statement into there, and let's just assign this to result equals that query. Okay, And now we have access to a count. So we can say count, and this is basically what we're going to do is count how many rows are returned. So there's a function called MySQLi underscore num underscore rows, and what we're going to pass that in is this result. Okay, so that's going to tell us how many rows in the database that this was true for. So what we could do is we could say echo count. So let's do that real quick. And what I'm going to do is purposely put in Levi's, and what we should return is 1. Yep, right there, 1, because there is one of those in the database. The same thing if I do Nike, I got 1. Now what if I did Polo? This should, yep, I got 0. So there's not Polo in my database. Okay, so that's helpful information because that allows us to make sure that this is going to be unique in the database. So I can go ahead and get rid of that echo statement, and I can put a check here. So what I can do is say if, let's go ahead and set up our skeleton of our if statement, and in here in our condition what we can do is say if count is greater than 0. Wow. So if count is greater than 0, then we're going to add to our errors array. So then we could say errors this is not supposed to be inside of there, so errors, and we concatenate on to the errors array. So we'll say that brand already exists, please choose another brand name. Okay, so now what should happen is if let's go ahead and reload the page here. If I type in Levi's, I should have an error printed to the screen. Yep, that brand already exists, please choose another brand name. Same thing if I do Nike. Okay, but how about instead of saying that brand already exists, let's make it a little more, let's just get rid of that brand here, and right before all of this let's do brand. Okay, and we'll concatenate on there. So if we save that now and we reload the page, it will give us a little more useful information. So Levi's, so it says Levi's already exists, please choose another brand name. So now if I choose Nike, Nike already exists, please choose another brand name. Okay, so now also if I submit with nothing in it, it says you must enter a brand. So what happens now if I do something that's not in our database, like Polo? Nothing happens. Okay, so essentially all we have to do now is we've checked everything that we want to check with this. We want to add that to the database. Okay, so let's do that. So right here in this else statement where we added our comment earlier, if the errors are empty, not empty, display the errors. Else, so if they are empty, we want to go ahead and add it to the database. So what we can do now is we can say, let's go ahead and set up our SQL statement. So SQL, okay, we'll put insert into, we're going to insert that to the brand table. So insert into brand, and then we want to into the brand column, then we'll do values, and then we're only entering one column, so this is kind of a lot here, so but I like to just keep my syntax the same. So enter into brand, and then into the brand column we're going to give it the values, and the value here that we're going to enter, we got to put this in single quotes, brand, and that's got to be lowercase. Okay, so this is our statement here. So then all we have to do then is we need to run that query. So db, we'll call the method of query, and pass it that SQL statement. Alright, and then we want to refresh the page or reload the page. So what we can do here is use PHP's function of the header, and inside of single quotes we're going to do location colon, and then we'll just say space brands.php. Add our semicolon at the end of that line, save it out. So now we'll reload this page, and if I go through, our errors should error out. Yep, we got errors. If I try to do nothing, okay. So now let's try to add Polo and hit add brand, and you can see that Polo is now in our table, and indeed if we look in our database and refresh it, Polo is now number 3 here. So now we can go through and add as many brands as we like. But at this point, let me take a drink real quick. We need to talk about security a little bit. So what I want to do is I just want to demonstrate something. I could use tags inside of this, and I could just, let's put some text in here. We'll put bold. Okay, so I can enter this into my database, okay, and that's going to be printed back out. And this is a security issue because if I could technically, you know, I could add information about the server print it back to the page. I could put an iframe in here and put some sort of porn site or something displayed back on the page. I could do all kinds of things and it would break the page. So let's just go and add that and see what happens. So you notice our bold tags are missing, and this is being printed back as HTML, and this text is bold. So we need to take care of that. And what we're going to do is go back to our helpers file, and we're going to create a new function that we can use throughout our application, and we're just going to call this sanitize. Okay, and we're going to pass it in dirty. So we're going to pass it in a dirty string, and what we're going to do is just return HTML entities. HTML entities is a pre-built PHP function that will turn those tags into HTML entities, and they will print to the screen rather than actually be enacted. And we'll also escape quotes and all kinds of other harmful things. So what we're going to do first is the first parameter is what are we going to run HTML entities on. Now that'll work, but that's not very secure. The next, but to make it a little more secure, what we could do is do int quotes for the second parameter, and that'll take care of single and double quotes. And then for the third parameter, inside of quotes here, I'm going to put UTF-8, and what that's going to do is define our character set so that people who are typing with other character sets can't bypass the single and double quote thing, or just use different characters that we're not expecting to handle. So if you do this, set up your HTML entities and use the int quotes and UTF-8, you can be reasonably sure that you are sanitizing your input. And it's important to sanitize anything that a user could input into your database. So now let's just try that again. I'm going to refresh the page here. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. We actually need to go to back to our brands page, and right here where we added this brand, we're going to wrap that in our sanitize function. So we'll wrap that whole piece right there in our sanitize function. Oops. Save that out. Now we'll reload the page, and now if I do the same exact thing, I can add, oops, I'm very sorry. If I can type, it's Mother's Day and I'm trying to hurry up and finish this video so I can spend time with my wife. But now if I add that and hit add brand, you can see that it just prints those tags to the screen, but it's not actually, those tags aren't actually being affected, aren't affecting the deal. So this is, you know, this would be the least of your worries, that somebody could change some styles. But if someone could put an iframe, let's say like some dirty porn picture or something like that on your site, that's not something you want to allow them to do. You also don't want them to be able to drop your users table or something like that in your database, which could happen if you're not properly escaping or sanitizing your input. So just a quick note on security. Let's go ahead and go back and clean up our database so that those aren't in here. But in our database, you can actually see what happens. This was the first one that we entered, and those tags are just entered right into our database without being changed. But the HTML entities function turns those tags into this right here. So that's the bold tag. So it actually saves that information differently in our database. And we typed it in just like this, but it entered it in the database just like that. So I'm going to go ahead and select these, everything except for that, and I'm going to delete that out of our database. Hit yes. Alright, so now we're just back down to Levi's, Nike, and Polo. And just for fun, let's add one more brand to our site here. So we'll reload the page, and I'm just going to add, I don't know, Skechers. I don't know why that came to my mind, but so now Skechers. He is adding them in alphabetical order, just for ease of use. And so what I want to do now is let's just clean up that table really quickly, and then we'll be done with this video. I know I said I was going to do a few more things in this video, but again, it's Mother's Day. I'm going to get off here, and in the next video we will do the delete and edit functionality of this brands page. But right here, if we go down to our table, and we're going to add one more class to the table right here. We're going to say table dash condensed. Alright, and that is a Bootstrap CSS. They gave it to us, and what that's going to do is get rid of some of the, it's going to cut your padding in half. So basically it's just gonna, we'll be able to fit more on the screen, and it's just tighten up our padding. We don't need a humongous amount of padding in this. This is a very simple table as it is, so we can go ahead and use the table condensed. Alright, well, I hope that was helpful. Please make sure you're sanitizing any information going into your database, and it's also useful before you print it back to the screen to escape your any kind of tags or anything like that coming back onto the screen as well. But if you're sanitizing going into the database, I don't know, there's a lot of debate whether you should sanitize going in or out of the database. I would say to keep it safe, you can do both. But so now let's just really quick look at your helpers. We've created two functions that we can use anywhere that we include our initialization or init.php file. We have our display errors, which puts our errors elements of our errors array into an unordered list, and we have this sanitize function which runs the HTML entities on that. So very useful, and in the next video we'll delete brands, we will edit brands, and we will finish that functionality of the admin area altogether. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please comment, like, and subscribe, and if not, I'm sorry, but I will see you in the next video. Have a great night.